And we are live. My name is JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser. Today, as you could see, we're joined by special guest, Mr. Matthew Pauly. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Jean-Paul. I'm great. How are you?
Good. It's good to have you with us. You have a committee, and you're raising awareness relative to the censorship in Canada. So I figured we were talking there on X, and I figured it would be great to have you on and spotlight this for you and give you some press, so to speak.
Yes, I really appreciate that. And just a little bit of backstory. The Stop C293 committee was formed in September of 2024 by a bunch of concerned citizens. Myself, I started and I just brought in a few people, and we had an all-star lineup of people involved in this, from James Roguski in the States, who's the big UN analyst basically, and really advocate hard against the pandemic agreements and the UNIHR and all that. We had Lisa Myron, actually, the big lawyer on Substack, who's done great work on C293, well, a bunch of other people. And today, a lot of people sort of went off into their own thing and doing their own stuff, and that's great. But we're still networking with everybody, and we still have a core committee that meets every week. And we, in 2024 and 2025, worked really closely with another group, which is actually Catalytic Conversations with Dr. Reema Labo, and Connie Shields as co-host. Well, Connie Shields is also on our core committee. And we work with them on this driving traffic to the site that they have the software for, that you put in your name and address and all this stuff, and it sends letters to the Senate, to your senators for your province. And we do a lot of interviews, and we're driving traffic, telling everyone, you must go to this, please do this to stop the C293. 225,000 letters were sent to the Senate, which it might have been a record, and it caused the Senate to slow down on this, almost sort of pause C293. They could see there was such huge groundswell of opposition by Canadians. So, by the way, C293 is the Pandemic Prevention Preparedness Act, which is, it sounds all so nice, right? But meanwhile, there's been no review at all of what they did in 2020 through the present. No review at all, even though the things that they did were complete variants, 180 degrees from all pandemic handling in the past.
All of these bills that this cabinet has introduced, they're essentially just dressed up. There's like Trojan horses. It's like protect the kids, save us from hate speech. It's all presented to the populace and to the electorate as something that is for your benefit. And
Exactly.
it just takes the slightest modicum of scrutiny, and you just simply have to read these bills, and it shines through what the actual premise is. So they dressed
Exactly.
it up conceptually with that language.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's like the UN SDGs, that they have these sexy little titles that tell you one thing, and it's like in Orwell. Ministry of Truth is actually the propaganda department. Ministry of Peace is the War Department. I mean, it's just horrible. And so all of these bills that are out right now, C2, from to C5, and then C8 and C9 and the C12 and 25 and etc. These are just, there's not one thing in these bills that's addressing the core problems that Canadians are facing today. from rampant inflation of food prices and rent and everything. People are so being bankrupted, like poverty is increasing dramatically, all because of the mainstream, well, the Liberal Party, and for that matter, any party, which includes the conservatives that support the UN Agenda 2030 and the SDGs and the World Economic Forum Great Reset agenda. And unfortunately, both parties do. All of the problems from mass immigration that's going on to, the inflation of, and food prices to crime. We have the highest crime we've had. I mean, higher than the United States, both violent and non-violent crime. And then they're going after parents' rights and, the whole, gender agenda, all this stuff. So anyway, but back to the point. So C293, we're still very much, we know this is coming back, right? But we know that, it's very strategic what they're doing, right? They have to get C8 and C9 done first because they don't want another 225,000 letters coming to the Senate to stop this thing. So C9, this Combating Hate Act, is just like out of the history books of what governments do when they start to go authoritarian. They criminalize speech, free speech, and say it's hate speech.
It's the modus operandi of all authoritarian regimes through
Exactly.
history, and you could see it coming. It's kind of the way you tell right away when
Yeah.
when thought and speech becomes subject to government scrutiny. I mean, in no way, shape, or form should they be imposing that on people, and it's so normalized now. Like we have, I frequently reference how uninformed our electorate is, even
Yeah.
on like basic fundamentals, basic rights and fundamentals. Like
Mhm.
it's shocking, and that's why they could dress these legislations up with this terminology, saying it's to combat hate speech,
Mhm.
and people accept that. But I mean, the like hate speech is what's supposed to be protected. That's why people advocate for free speech. You have a right to have these thoughts. Hate is obviously a subjective emotional determination that one makes.
Absolutely.
It's impossible. Like
Completely.
the legislative ambiguity of this allows the people to then interpret it as they deem fit, and we'll see
Well,
this utilized as we have in the UK. Any
correct.
any slight deviation from their rigid and radical orthodoxy will be missed, dis, or malinformation. Any criticisms of their mass migration policies, for instance,
Mhm.
that will be construed as hate speech.
Mhm.
And I mean, I believe Keir Starmer's jailed tens of thousands of British citizens.
It's about 14,000 arrests per year for Facebook posts and quote unquote mean tweets. It's outrageous. People are
Yeah.
getting criminal records for simply free speech. And one of the things about free speech, which has been fundamental, that gave us everything that we consider important, all of our rights and freedoms. If you don't have freedom of speech, it's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have freedom of speech, is at the very bottom there, all the other rights, freedom to assembly, freedom from search and seizure, freedom of religion, whatever, all of them rest on free speech. And if you don't have free speech, you don't have those other rights. They all evaporate. So this is, well, we know what's going on, right? I mean, the whole technocratic agenda and the bringing out of AI to start ruling us with security cameras and the 15-minute cities and all these UN agendas and this is, and so they have to get these bills through to implement this stuff. And so the first thing they're doing here is the C9 and the C8, it's the C2, etc. So we're, C293, we know, 293. I mean, it actually not only does it kill animal farming in Canada, it's super overregulated. Basically, half the animal farms will go out of business. But it actually takes away bodily autonomy.
It's funny. Every bill that this cabinet has introduced in this parliament has been seemingly to function to consolidate the power of the federal government.
Correct.
There's no other way to put it, and that's what they're doing. This is what we're in the process of seeing is a government go tyrannical. Like there's
Yes.
no other way to describe it. And the
Yes.
sensational nature when you start talking about the 2030 agendas and all of these globalist Davos and Brussels and all of the technocratic agenda stuff, which is quite evident, you start to lose the normies, so to speak. But I mean, at this point, if you're not aware that there's some externalities that are affecting our political discourse, you're not paranoid for noticing it. You're actually naive for not noticing it.
Well,
That's
yeah,
where
I
we are.
mean,
We've shifted.
Yeah, the mainstream media since 2018 has gotten $1 billion from the Liberal government. And we haven't seen this kind of thing before. I mean, certainly we know the CBC is getting their 1.3 or whatever billion per year, but the CBC has got dismally low ratings. But we're talking like global TV, CTV, and, Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, and some of the major newspapers across the country, radio stations. They're getting lots of money from the federal government, and that you cannot have an independent media if they're getting direct grants from the government. And that's why most Canadians are completely unaware. I mean, if they're getting their news, which most of them are from mainstream television, since 2019, they repealed a law from 1959 that says you can't lie to the people. So since 2019, and we saw all through COVID, all kinds of absolute lying by the government. So that's why people are unaware of all these UN agendas and all this destruction of the economy on purpose to, they want this universal basic income. If you make it so middle class people have trouble feeding their families, that's the actual point at which people will go resist. So that's the point when they want to just take them to that point, and then which they're doing by all this wasteful spending from 50 billion on EV plants that are owned by other corporations that fail and don't produce one battery. That's 50 billion. That's almost double a budget for the year as of a few years ago. The budget. 30 billion to Ukraine in cash and weapons so far. What are we doing? We've given more money per capita to the Ukraine than any other country, which is, a center for human trafficking and biological weapons. It's the most corrupt government in the West.
Well,
Or
it's like
arguably in the
you
East.
said,
Sorry?
they have it's like you were referencing, they have their propaganda arm, which is
Yes.
these corporate press swill merchants. They're state subsidized, and a lot of the electorate doesn't realize, like, the functional premise of the media was always considered the fourth estate. It's a
Mhm.
foundational, pillar for a democratic society. Their job is to condense the complexity of some of these bills and then present that as a digestible summation to the electorate. Their job, their function is intended to inform the electorate, and it's an abdication of their responsibility in every way. And that's why you're seeing this independent market arise online to actually endeavor to tell the truth, because they're
Yes.
just pushing narratives. And some of this stuff they wouldn't be able to get away with. Like, look at the effort that went to cast Zelensky as some kind of hero, and they're standing up for democracy as the country is, like you referenced. And not this isn't news. Everyone knows Ukraine has been the most corrupt country in Europe forever. This
Yes.
is common knowledge, but everyone's living in this mainstream media bubble, and they're not being adequately informed to make any decisions.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. This is we've come to new lows in this country, and it's not going to get any better before it gets much worse. And ultimately it's not going to get better unless people continuously pass along to their friends and neighbors and actually let them know, hey, look, you need to stop watching TV, and here you need to go to independent media. Here's a few things that I follow on online. And if we can get more people aware, I mean, for example, the CFIA story, the ostrich story, that was going exponential. That was as big as a trucker thing almost in terms of the number of people that were getting involved. And I got to weave that in a bit later, but that's an important story. So why don't we get right into C9?
Yeah, let's get into
Yeah.
let's bring up some of these slides we have. So first we'll bring up your
Yeah, just the promo. So
series here.
there's a series, the C9 series, or the Stop C9 Interviews series, and this is something that we did, just started this week, because we actually we're going to do a press release last weekend, press conference actually on Monday, an official one using a government press studio. However, at the last minute, it seems like there was some delicacy that we were unaware of regarding our kind of, they supported our C293 stuff. They didn't notice that actually we're going at C9 to accomplish preventing C293 coming back, because they can't bring back C293 easily with all that 225,000 letters going to Senate unless they silence people. Anyway, so our press release went out, but we had to pull it back because we lost the studio. And now we're working with that sponsor, and we actually understood that we didn't give them enough notice to be able to, understand everything we were doing. So, so I've taken the speakers. No, this I would definitely stop. We had a number of really good speakers set up, and they included people like, well, the first one was Sean Buckley, but he had to pull out. There's some other things that came up, but then we had we also have Leighton Gray, a constitutional lawyer from Alberta, we've interviewed before on the C293 committee. We have people like Randy Hillier, the independent MPP here in Ontario, who actually was with the Conservatives. He got stuck because he was speaking out against COVID. He got kicked out of that. So he was independent. Now he's not in office. But he's a very good speaker, and he's, pushing back against the agenda, the narrative. We have Ted Kuntz, the head of the National Citizens Inquiry. We have Vincent Gerses, who is the president of Police for Freedom, and been quite involved since 2020 in advocating. For example, the Detective Gru's story. He is doing some marvelous work advocating for that. Anyway, so this the first thing was yesterday, and we interviewed Sean Buckley about C9. I just wanted to show you that we're focusing, we're trying to relate it to Canadians as best we can. So that's why I put in that title: Why Fine Jail for Mean Tweets While Violent and Property Crime is Higher than the US. And it is. We were never like this before. We're way more crime ridden than the US. So basically, why? Because sentencing, as I say here, due to soft on crime sentencing, and not just the sentencing, but the bail. They have changed the bail policies and the sentencing policies as part of the DEI agenda, and as part of, if you're not white, you're considered disadvantaged, so we have to give you a break. And I mean, it's just purposeful, obviously, to
And
cause crime.
it's
Increase.
also purposeful to fuel division, because we're
Yeah,
seeing that, like, the
absolutely.
division that is
Yes.
occurring within our electorate it's inorganic. We're
Yes.
being pushed towards it. Now, obviously, there's cause and effect. You
Yes.
can't look at what's occurring in Canada and attribute it to incompetent policies or incompetent governance or bad policies. We're far beyond that framing making sense.
That's
We're to the
right.
point now where it's very obviously, especially when you put it in context geopolitically, like, this is an agenda. It's happening in all of the Commonwealth countries, especially, but
Yeah.
even most of the Western democracies. We're seeing this all through the EU. Everything's being centralized through Brussels, and this is what Carney is pushing Canada towards. And we're in this again, the frustration, and this is why I think it's important and wanted to have you on, is there's a ton of people, like, there's a ton of relatively prominent people in the independent media that are trying to speak against this. But
Yes.
it's still impossible to get past that mainstream bubble, right? Like, people,
Yes.
the vast majority, Joe Average presently, still has no idea that there's anything wrong. They're just
Well,
living their life.
correct. And so let's use this interview to educate, to actually share. One of the things I learned in doing interviews about at things like C293 branched out to everything. For example, Sashi Ledipova and Debbie Lerman, the COVID dossier. I mean, she's a former VP of a farm. It's a big pharma. Actually, it's a medical devices company, and she is a really smart woman. And she worked with a medical journalist, Debbie Lerman, and the COVID dossier documents the entire origin of the COVID operation. And it's just shocking. It's actually coming from the National Security Council in the US, February 4th, 2020. They invoked chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear attack. And then they invoked the PrEP Act, which gives total control now of the military and the intelligence agency, the CIA, to run this operation where they control who can say what. And there's automatic liability shield all the way from manufacturers down to the person injecting. And they can lie. The countermeasures don't even have to work. The whole thing is an operation. Anyway, so we found with them, because we did 3 series of interviews, and I read after 2, no, this isn't working. We're not getting enough viewers. So I said, we've got to give visuals to people. So this is what we're going to do now. Go ahead and flip up the first visual. And this is what people can then share as well to try and explain to people what this bill is. So let's give them the first thing on C9, and we'll actually show a little bit about the bill. First of all, oh yeah, that's my interview schedule. Just mentioned that
Okay.
the people I mentioned before. We've got Leighton Gray coming up next week, etc. We can show that too at the end. So the top 5 problems with C9, that the Combating, Hate Act, which, by the way, I mean, if they were really concerned about hate, they should be worried about actual hate crimes like burning down churches, and for which the official number is over 400 Christian churches were burned in Canada in the last 15 years. So anyway, they're not actually prosecuting real hate crimes, which involve violence and property destruction. Instead, now they're going to muzzle people. So look at this. The first thing is vague and expansive definition of hatred. 2, elimination of attorney general consent for hate propaganda prosecutions. See, before in our existing hate laws, the attorney general had to get involved because, when you're making a definition of the state of mind of a person, of their thought, that they were really, coming from a position of hate, you need someone who's very well schooled in the Constitution and the freedoms and how to balance things. They've gotten rid of that in C9. So even a junior crown or a police officer can enter and see somebody really emotional in front of them and is crying, and so, well, it's okay, I'll charge the other person. And so this is going to be just like the Britain thing. Anyway, criminalization number 3, a public display of symbols associated with hate. And of course, they've taken out the one that most people think is it's really offensive to, especially to people who are survivors, their family, they lost family, right? That symbol, that swastika symbol, is really offensive. So they've said, okay, we're going to outlaw this symbol. Now, everyone who uses it, it can be prosecuted and go to jail. But that's very slippery slope, as we'll go into when we get to that. Number 4, elevation of any offense to a hate crime with draconian penalties. So you can be charged for anything under the criminal code, not at the provincial, but at the federal level, any, federal thing. And all of a sudden, they can say, oh, you got 2 years jail for that other offense. Now we're going to call that a hate crime as well. Now you go to jail for 5 years, 2.5 times, or no, double and a half, actually. But they can then, not maybe not 2.5, because Sean Buckley said it was 2.5 on one of them. So maybe it's one that goes to, 2.5 or something. But it is 2.5 on some of them. And it can go from 5 to 10 years. So you have 5 years in one thing, now it's 10. And if you have 14 years for a crime that you've done, it goes to life imprisonment, as they mark it as a hate crime. So the elevation number 4 there, that's a huge, huge thing. 5, broad intimidation offense targeting access to religious and cultural sites. Yes. Okay. We'll get to that one. First one, I think I have grabbed some research on that.
In 1 moment here.
You're doing great with these. These
Yeah, it's
are
pretty good. I'm proud of myself, man. I'm not great with this StreamYard, but I'm pulling through.
oh yeah, it's a learning thing. I'm learning too all the time. So there's a vague and expansive definition of hate. The bill codifies hatred in a way that while attempting precision, still risks capturing vehement but lawful criticism or satire. It hinges on detestation or vilification without clear boundaries. I mean, the idea that you're going to interpret what someone is saying as hateful, that's criminalizing thought. And how is it that you're going to prove that somebody's thought was hateful? And even if it was, is that really worthy that we're going to spend time getting our police to put people in jail because they had some hateful thoughts that were kind of, by their speech, we can interpret that must have been hateful. So therefore, we're going to put them in jail. I mean, what kind of Orwellian world do people, certainly don't want to live in. Anyway.
That's it too. That's the key word, Orwell. That's what we're seeing. This is dystopian level thought crimes. Like we get into the specifics, but you kind of forget the sensational premise of it. Like they're literally trying to enforce their orthodoxy. That's the only premise. Continue.
Right.
Sorry.
And okay, the next sentence was, this ambiguity invites inconsistent application, undermining the predictability that's required for robust free speech under the Charter. Very good point. As soon as you're having to try and infer what someone's thinking, you're going to be making all kinds of mistakes, and it's going to be inconsistent. And also inconsistent application, therefore, which is not fair. There's a quote here. Hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification that is stronger than disdain or dislike. This is actually in the bill. Read that. I mean, you tell me that your average person has to understand the word detestation and vilification, and that their speech must not cross the boundary of detestation and vilification. If it does, they could go to jail. I mean, it's going to be very hard for people to know. Basically, it's going to have just a chilling effect. With $20,000 fines for this, being charged under this act, and up to 2 years in jail, just explicitly, not if you're not involved in some other crime, that's going to just shut people up, because you can't even tell what's going to be called hate. Um, the last point here is, this is coming from new subsection 319 bracket 7 and clause 4 bracket 2, cross-referenced in the hate crime section. This definition permeates multiple offenses, amplifying its reach. Okay, so this is the first point on this really vague and expansive definition of hatred.
So before we move on to the next point, we have about 168 people watching. I would
Great.
very much appeal to everyone if they could share this room. It's very important that people are getting educated on what these bills actually mean, and that's what we endeavor to do. So please share the stream.
Yes, please do. Actually, I could share the stream if I was. I should have asked you about that. I think I just go into StreamYard. I haven't done it before, so I
I,
haven't
I
tried.
think we have to do it at the start, but we
Okay,
should get some good viewership here.
okay. I'll certainly repost it. Number 2, elimination of Attorney General consent for hate propaganda prosecutions. This removes a critical safeguard under frivolous or politically motivated charges under sections 318 and 319 of the Criminal Code, allowing police to lay charges without provincial oversight. This lowers the bar for criminalizing speech deemed hateful, potentially flooding courts with cases that target controversial opinions and deterring open debate. Quote, subsection 318.3 bracket 3 of the act is repealed, unquote. That's right from the bill. So they're pulling that out, which means the AG, the Attorney General, is no longer involved. And as I mentioned this in the previous point, this directly scraps the requirement for the Attorney General written consent before proceeding, a bulwark against abuse since 1970. So as Sean Buckley, the constitutional lawyer, was saying yesterday, if now a police officer that's junior, a newer police officer, he doesn't understand the implications of how careful you have to weigh constitutional things to decide whether or not you're going to lay this charge. And if someone's emotional and they're crying and they feel really, really hurt, he's going to feel, he doesn't know that you can't let your emotions impact crime, like an arrest, basically, for a hate crime. So the idea that no longer are there people who are very well schooled in the constitutional rights, like the Attorney General, or even provincial senior prosecutors. This is really bad.
It's I want to speak to that point too, where it says deterring open debate. That's the
Yes.
premise. They
Yes.
want to normalize authoritarianism. If you're from
Correct.
Iran, if you're from China, you know that you can't take to social media and criticize your government. And that's what they want here. They want that disincentive. They don't have the infrastructure nor the money to prosecute everyone. That's what they're doing. It's like Confucius, you hurt one and you terrify 1,000. It's like kind of the premise of terrorism. It's
Yes.
it's intended to disincentivize people from actually speaking against the regime. There's no
Correct.
better way to say it.
And right now we have such a backlog of prosecutions that people are being let go for even violent crimes
Yeah.
because it's elapsed too long. That's just showing how overburdened our justice system is.
We've seen that in the UK as well with Keir Starmer. Before this legislation went into effect, they had sweeping reform where they let all kinds of violent offenders out of jail early, so they
Yes,
could free up space for the political dissidents. It's
correct.
it's just clear what's happening.
Well, yes, and absolutely, they want more crime because this is part of putting the pressure on the population so they'll finally snap and say, "We demand you do something." And then out will come the digital ID, out will come the surveillance cameras, out will come, basically totalitarian rule. And
That's spot on. It's actually a
yeah,
concept called anarcho tyranny. when
Yes.
the state doesn't enforce the laws in order to kind of sway the public in a certain way. It's actually absolutely repugnant.
Thank you. I heard you say that in a podcast. I appreciate getting the definition, so that helps me understand what's that was. Thank you.
No
Um,
worries.
the third thing, criminalization of public display of symbols associated with hate. The new offense broadly prohibits displaying terrorism or Nazi-related symbols to the public if it willfully promotes hatred, with penalties up to 2 years in prison. Now, on its, the reading, it seems like, well, I mean, we don't want to, have people that are 80 years old that, survived World War II in death camps in Germany or Poland, you know, have these open display of these Nazi symbols. And it's sort of see that's, that's not so totally wild. The problem is the implications of this. We know that federal minister just like a few weeks ago said that, oh yeah, Deuteronomy in the Bible and also Acts 2 or something, they contain hate speech. This is a real problem. So what they're going to do, obviously, I mean, this is open to do it. They can say that the Christian cross represents the Bible and Christianity, and in that book there are things that they have deemed hate speech. So therefore, the symbol for Christianity is hate symbol because it represents hate speech in their holy book, and it's frightening, the implications of that. And as we've seen, the liberal government, is the post-national state, and the huge ties with the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab. We've penetrated half of that cabinet. These people are godless. They're not godless. They believe in Satan, right? And that's their whole thing, Lucifer and Ball and all these things. Just look at the CERN opening in Switzerland, the CERN opening, big performance, or halftime at the Super Bowl, or the Olympics in 2022 opening. I mean, these people at the top level. Anyway, so they're going after Christianity. That's why they didn't prosecute about the 400 churches being burned. And so we know that once they say that the symbols, and they can just add symbols as they wish, that's going to be very, very bad for freedom of religion. And anyway, quote, everyone commits an offense who willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group by displaying in any public place as used by or principally associated with a listed entity by the Nazi Hakenkreuz or the Nazi double Sigrun, or see a symbol that nearly resembles a symbol described in paragraph A or B that is likely to be confused with that symbol. New subsections 31922 and 23, clause 41. Note that symbol, by the way, is not, they didn't invent that. That goes back thousands of years and was used in actually Buddhism and other places as well. And actually
It's a
in
Hindu
Native Indian.
symbol. It's a Hindu symbol if it's inverted, and
Yeah,
it means love. It means it's a positive symbol in Hindu culture. So yeah, you're getting into just it's the precedent that it's setting, like you
yes,
were illustrating. We have to tolerate detestable speech in order to have a free society. That's the
exactly.
cost to pay. And I'm a firm believer that let these people oust themselves. You don't
Exactly.
want if there's a Nazi element or if there's a radical elements in our society, we want them to be able to speak so we can
Exactly.
identify who they are. We
Exactly.
understand this, right?
Exactly. We do. I mean, if people identify their views by their speech, we as in, the free citizens will know, hey, look, this is something I want to tell my family. Let's just stay away from this person. That their ideology is very, very, very wrong, and it's damaging, it's racist, and etc. So, we want to know who are like that. And if you make it so they can't, we can't tell, that's not doing us any good, really. But anyway, I digress. I agree with your point.
Yes.
Um, Elevation number 4, elevation of any offense to a hate crime with draconian penalties by creating a standalone hate crime provision that aggravates penalties for any underlying events from mischief to assault. So you could literally just mischief. You spray paint something, and that's a mischief charge. And there's various levels depending on what you did. Like if you punch someone in the face, that's more serious, more penalties. But this combining thing, we already talked about this, where it's going to, more than double sometimes the actual, they take the original thing like mischief charge, say you got 2 months or 2 years of probation or something. Now it could be elevated to something much more serious. So that's what this one's all about. Quote, everyone who commits an offense, if the commission of that included offense is motivated by hatred. Now, how, again, are you going to know that they were motivated by hatred? But even so, anyway, hatred based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, age, sex, mental or physical ability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression is guilty of an offense and liable for the punishment prohibited for in subsection 5 and up to life imprisonment. And Sean was mentioning this yesterday. Well, what if someone was spray painting something and then they were, say, Muslim, and they spray painted something that everywhere, their tag, on a bunch of buildings, and they actually did it on a Christian church or something. And then it turns out that they went online and found out that person had said bad things, some posts that they think was really critical and almost hateful towards Christians. Now they can say, okay, this has hate crime motivated. And now the mischief thing becomes way more serious, and they go to jail for a long time. It may just be a tag that's nothing to do with against Christianity. It's just a mischief thing, right? So
Well, it just gives them the power to then frame anything that way.
yes,
It's so subjective, it's so ambiguous, and clearly we know that it's going to be weaponized against certain political perspectives, because that's what we've seen in the UK. Canada is in a very unique position right now. We have the UK to see where we're going to be in 2 or 3 years. They're a bit further ahead.
And folks who are in mainstream media don't really understand what's going on. They need to get onto, and in Canada, of the big social media platforms, X is the one that's the least censored, and it's really important to get your news from an independent source that's not censored. And we've got lots of good podcasters and people like yourself and Payman Asghari, and we've got in Canada we've got a whole bunch, Juno News, and we've got the investigative journalist Sam Cooper. We've got gosh, there's so many. True North. I like the guy out in Saskatchewan. Me, never mind. Number 5, broad intimidation, offense targeting, access to religious and cultural sites. This creates a new crime for conduct intended to provoke a state of fear. So broad intimidation, state of fear, impeding access to places of worship and cultural hubs, punishable up to 10 years. Protesters, journalists, or speakers exercising dissent near such sites could face charges. Suppressing public assembly or expression in sensitive areas without adequate. Gosh. Quote, every person commits an offense who engages in any conduct that they intend to provide a state of fear in a person. Now, again, how are you going to know that they're intending to state, so if here's what this has gone to in the UK. You're standing across the street from an abortion clinic. Well, this is places of worship or cultural hubs. So, okay, not exactly the same. But say you're praying in your head, and you're just standing there because you're against something that is with this. Maybe it's a religion thing, but you're just not. They can say, "Oh, you're praying in your head," hate crime. The way that this could be used. I mean, I understand. I've seen some of the Palestinian things where they were standing outside of synagogues and really, really getting close in and intimidating people going in. I can sort of understand if there's very there has to be, I don't know. If we expand this out and say that there's no protest, it doesn't even say how far away. Like, it seems to me that if you're some distance, that there's no way you could be, impeding people, and you're, at least, I don't know, 100 meters or longer or farther from that, and you can't block any access points. It seems to me that if you could just now be charged for being half a block or a block away from a church, a synagogue, or what's the one for the Islam? Anyway, their religious buildings, then it seems to me that you can now go to jail for up to 10 years for standing. Like, how far away do they say when they say, impeding? Well, that's impeding access. Okay, so what's impeding? They don't say the distance. They might say, well, they have to go down this street or this street or this street to get there. So if you're standing on that street on the sidewalk, you're impeding because now they're having to drive through that, and they're going to be frightened because you've got signs that they find offensive. I mean, it's pretty scary where this could lead to. That being said, I understand that we have existing laws that it covers some of this. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It almost seems satirical. It's so counterintuitive. It's seemingly so sensational that when you're reading it and you're actually thinking like, wow, like this is absolutely nuts. And again, like I'm glad like we went through it in detail because so many people just have no idea. They hear broad opinions on it, and again, the electorate is intentionally uninformed. There's no mistake that I believe it's essentially we're conditioned and they manufacture consent with a lot of these their media propaganda arms and their psyops and their division ops. Like I can't remember now. I'm younger than you. I'm 42, but I don't remember a time in Canada that there was so much division based upon every variable metric, even the young and the old. There's the young people are blaming the boomers, and it's like everyone has to realize like this is the systems of control. This
Yes.
is not the right or the left or the immigrants or indigenous or white people or any of these other groups. This is a systemic problem with the way we're being governed.
Correct. And where is this coming from? Well, the UN, changes implementing, their not only SOGI, but a whole bunch of changes to our educational curriculum in the last 20 years. We've got entire generation, actually almost 2 generations now, that have been taught a whole bunch of ideology that they're the victim, and that you've got to choose which victimhood you are. Is it because you're gay? Is it because you're short? Is it because you're overweight? Is it because your skin color is different? Or not different, but it's not. The whole narrative is if you're white, you're completely privileged. Which, I mean, institutionalizing racism is a bad thing. I don't like. I must admit that when I was in university, I was very left. My father was a cultural anthropologist, a very left guy, and I was campaigning for the NDP. I on the student council and stuff. I was supporting all kinds of the DEI stuff, and then at the same time, well, it wasn't called DEI then, but the idea of quotas for women, quotas for people of color in hiring. And I got connected up with a professor who took me aside and welcomed me into his life, actually, and debated the heck out of me with his wife over dinner many times. And all I could quote his ideology, because I was doing a joint major in sociology where we had to read Marx and all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I was doing computer science, and he was a computer science guy, and his father was a tool maker, and he was a brilliant mathematician and computer scientist, though. Well, not though. I mean, that follows. Toolmaker father is very creative. Anyway, so I actually fell for that stuff, but now it's what's been done in schools is 10 times more. And therefore we have a whole generation, as you say, they think the boomers are the problem. I mean, I'm right on the edge actually of being Gen X and boomer. But the people who are actually voting and trying to change things, the voting rates of people that are 65 and older is much higher than people that are below 30. And I welcome the fact that there's actually been more, particularly in the States in the last election, of young people voting. It's really making a difference, and we need that more. Anyway.
Well, it's becoming real now for young people. They're
Yes.
they're they're coming of age and they're realizing like, wow, I can't own a home.
Can't go home. No.
I'm going to be stuck paying an exorbitant rate
Yep.
because of the inflation in the rental market, because of the weaponized mass migration. Furthermore, I'm subsidizing this process with the 42 to 43% of my income that is taken from me by the government. So
Yes.
it's demoralizing, and it's really waking people up politically pretty fast too. Unfortunately, it's seemingly not fast enough, but I use this analogy frequently. It's like watching the Canadian electorate wake up is like watching a vessel being filled with rainwater. It
Mhm.
seems absolutely excruciatingly slow, but
Mhm.
inevitably, every raindrop that
Mhm.
accumulates, inevitably it reaches that breaching point, and then it spills over, and that's what we're kind of watching in real time.
Yes, and I'm glad you identified. It's the youth that are actually the worst off as a result of all of these things. Since 2020, a lot of them have been had to get jabbed with an experimental mRNA countermeasure for a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear event is the protocol. This is not this is not this is not a vaccine, and it changes your body to produce a bioweapon, the spike protein, and because the pseudouridine in it, there's no excreting it, and there's no off switch. There are people 5 years in now that from the vaccination, they're still producing the spike, and the level of excess all-cause mortality, because that spikes build up because you can't excrete it unless you take the McCullough-based spike protein detox protocol, curcumin, um, nattokinase, and bromelain. Those are all natural things. Side point. So they have now been jabbed. Their stuff, it's literally shortened their lives. And now there's a 17% youth unemployment rate. Why is that? Well, we are funding the federal government through all the foreign worker programs and all this stuff. If you're an employer and you're Tim Hortons or any entry level job, and I mean, managers even in certain contexts, 70% of the funding for those positions is provided by the government if you hire a new immigrant or you hire a foreign worker. So they're locked out. The Canadians, young people trying to get jobs. I mean, it's like I said, 17% unemployment, and they're looking at this no chance of getting a house, and how are we going to support and raise a family? Like all of the options that they should have been taken away from them by our government's irresponsible. Well, it's deliberate what they've done.
That that's right, and the people in the workforce, me being one of them, we are experiencing wage suppression and wage stagnation. When you allow, your company to import cheaper labor and then subsidize that by the taxpayer, I mean, that's creating an incentive, like a positive feedback loop that's going to be disastrous, and it is, and we're seeing the repercussions of it.
Yes.
Wage suppression, inflation in the rental market, housing market is just it's unattainable for your average working Canadian. It's never been like this. It's just it's and then there's the division is fueled so much, it's fomented so much by these media apparatus that it's pushing a lot of young people into more radical ideologies than they would have otherwise, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're seeing all of the effects kind of condensed together. So if you don't mind, sir, for the last 12 minutes here, we don't got a hard stop, but we'll go for about an hour. I wouldn't mind taking a few questions. Would you
Sure.
be okay with that?
Sure. One thing though, before the end, I just want to throw that slide up at the very end after
Oh
the
yeah.
questions or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no worries. And you can
Sure.
definitely have a few more. So we have Granddaddy O. The CBC has been lying for the sitting gov since the day of its inception. That's its purpose, to steer via media the collective psyche of the nation. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we definitely both agree with that.
Absolutely.
But it's
Absolutely.
it's like you indicated too. A lot of people don't realize because the CBC gets all the attention because they're kind of directly state funded, but every other mainstream corporate outlet is state subsidized. The state's money is still going into it. So we don't have a media class. We have a propaganda arm. It's virtually Pravda in the West
Correct.
now.
It is. Absolutely. It absolutely is. And I, it being as a software engineer and, architect and such for 30 years, I always stayed away from government because we knew that if you go and work in government, it's not going to look good on your resume because their reputation of doing technology is really awful because their management structure, because it's a bureaucracy, is just, completely malignant. So I did take a contract though at CBC once, about 15 years ago, and I will never forget it. I just couldn't believe what I saw. Anyway, we have that. In Toronto, less than 1% of the people basically are even watching the CBC News. Like it's absolutely dismal. And yet, this is 1.2 or 3 billion, whatever, a year that's going to fund a propaganda thing like Pravda. It's essentially what it's doing. It's interesting. Sean Buckley said that in political philosophy, it's considered that you need to be able to manipulate the public opinion at times of war and things like this in the national interest. Well, since they've taken away that law in 2019 about not being able to lie to the Canadian people, we've seen since 2020 the most, as your point said, the polarization of people, so much opposition, and and people are so critical of other people. And I wanted to mention the Bruce Party's ideology. Certain thing comments about how C9 is really when they it says instilling a state of fear. This is never in the law before. This new interpretation that if you criticize someone's ideology suddenly and they hold that dear to their heart, that could be instilling a state of fear. Anyway, I'm sorry. What was the question on the CBC? Yeah, that was right on.
No, that was a good answer. Absolutely. So we have Payman Ascari here. Question for Matt: do you think there is a political solution out of this?
Well, normally the thing that we do, right, is we get people awake and aware as much as possible, and they start to stand up and get their voices known by writing letters or just calling their elected representatives, turning up at rallies, and the government follows the people when the people start to push back because they're afraid, of basically rebellion, but they're more so that they're not going to get reelected. That is, the normal thing. The thing we've got in this situation, which makes it exceptionally different, is the entire world has been infiltrated by these people that are representing some super wealthy people in the world that control the money supply. And that's the world, the Bilderbergs, right? The World Economic Forum and the UN agenda. Everything about the UN is that. It was created by Rockefeller initially, the League of Nations, right? And then, they finally caught on that this was, really bad. And so they just reformed it and called it the UN. And anyway, so I don't know if in this situation it's going to be resolved by writing letters to your elected representative. There's so much, the politicians are going along with this, and that is really, really frightening. Not just, your average it is your average politician now at the federal, provincial, and even the municipal level. Your average there's some exceptions, but most of them are going along with it. So, Payman, that's a good question, and I don't know, how in an unarmed country that there's we do know there's a history in the last 150 years. I think it's 3.5% of people who stand up in the streets and say, no, we do not consent. We're not going along with this. No violence, just civil disobedience. They have won every time. So that ultimately could do it. And the trucker convoy showed not 3.5%, but that this is possible.
Absolutely. I agree. Let me see what else we have here. So, Granddaddy, mass action strikes, decentralized protests like the convoy. I think for sure the way to do this, and as you alluded to, like we're not armed. We don't have militias. We're not set up in Canada to rival the government. We're kind of at their mercy. But what we do have is courage. We have to accept the repercussions for this. I'm going to speak my mind until they throw me against the wall or in the gulags. I've understood the consequences, but we need people to do that, and it's contagious. The more people that can stand against this and be vocal and not be afraid, because it's like I frequently say, man, they don't fear my voice. They don't fear your voice. What they fear more than anything is our voice. And that's what they're trying to suppress with this legislation. That goes to the core of it, in my perspective.
Yes.
So we're coming to the end here, sir. I'm going to bring up that last slide.
Yeah, just the schedule.
Is this the one here? One sec. That was the last one you had sent.
No, I think it was the first one I sent. I showed the speaking schedule. Yeah, that one.
There we are.
So I just wanted to say that. So, when Carney and gosh, it was it last week or the week before on the Wednesday night, stopped the Justice Committee. I mean, the person resigned there was a chair of the Justice Committee and went to somewhere else. And all of a sudden, the committee stopped. It was evaluating in second reading Bill C9. They didn't meet Thursday or Friday either. And as a result, they essentially have paused C9 last week. But this week, I've heard they have had some discussions. There's no way they're passing it in time because the end of the legislature is the 14th, right? So this session, but they're going to come back in early February. Now, why did Carney pause that? Because of, I mean, this is, you know, he hasn't publicly said this, but from inside information that's come out, it's because he realized that the Bloc Liberal Alliance to take out the religious exemption, so you couldn't get charged for hate crime if you're just quoting scripture because of your religious belief. They were taking that out, amending the bill, and that made so people across Canada, you know, of all different faiths, just freak out and start writing letters and calling elected representatives. So he's thinking by putting this in pause now and just coming back in February that it'll just calm down and people will forget about it. That's why I said no, that we have to now focus on this exclusively. And that's why we have this series you can see here on the schedule. We just had one yesterday. We've got 3 more this month. So that's 4 this month. And we're going to try and get 4 in January, and every, you know, really good speakers on this. Like, for example, you know, Leighton Gray, excellent constitutional lawyer. I've interviewed him before for Stop C293. Very, very serious guy. And very, you know, good heart. And he's done a lot of really good things. And of course, Ted Kuntz, the head of the National Citizens Inquiry, which is really important, because they actually had oaths that people took that gathered actual evidence. The only powers they didn't have was subpoena powers, but they have compiled through, you know, meeting in 10 different cities across Canada, thousands of testimonies of Canadians about all the crimes that were done under COVID. And all politicians are afraid of them, by the way. And then finally, Vincent Gersey's president of Police for Freedom. And I think I mentioned earlier, Vincent has been totally involved from the Adamson's barbecue thing to, you know, the truckers convoy in Ottawa to, you know, the Helen Grew's thing. He's been really, really pushing and making a difference, and very, very happy that he's going to be giving us his perspective as a former 30-year OPP officer and now president of Police for Freedom Canada. And then, like I say, in January, we're going to have a bunch of other speakers as well.
Well, I must say, sir, I admire what you're doing. I want to support it any way I can. I'm going to recommend
Thank
you
you.
to a few other people I know that have platforms, because I would like to support this and help in any way possible. And I'd like for you to come on and speak with me again. I think you and I could go for hours.
Oh yeah, I know I've been talking the whole time, but I would
No,
love to
no,
hear
that's not what we
listen to you
want.
talk more. I really like watching your podcast. I think you're wow. I just really respect the work that you're doing. I got to ask, is that a real background or is that a green screen?
That's totally real, man.
Wow,
I'm in my
you have
kitchen.
good taste. You have great taste.
You know
Wow.
what, sir? I can't take the compliment without telling you. I watched a YouTube video how to dress a background with the lighting. It's all about the
Yes.
lighting and depth,
Yes.
just to make it look more professional.
It's
But
very nice.
again, sir, it's a pleasure to have you on, and we'll do it again in the future. I want to appeal to everyone one more time. We got about almost 300 watching live. I derive the vast majority of my views after the live broadcast.
Mhm.
This is a very important episode. If you guys could all share this, get over there and follow Matthew Pauly too, and share his stuff, because like if we're going to stand a chance, it involves education, and
Yes.
that's what you're endeavoring to do. And I just admire it. Thank
Well,
you very
thank you.
much for coming on to speak with me, sir.
Thank you very much, Jean Paul. I really am glad to have had the opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for tuning in, guys. My name's JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser. Cheers.